Hey everybody, it's Retro DM Ray back with you for another video in our series on the role-playing game primer and old school playbook by Gonnerman. Last time, if you watched that last video, you have a image on there of the map key, and so we are continuing our discussion on that dungeon map key that he has in the book. It actually starts dungeon level 1 key on page 28, and we've read through those first couple of rooms, and now we're going to start reading from room 3 and going forward from there. And again, that map is on that previous video, as well as the legend for that map. So we'll be reading a few pages today and continuing on. Just a reminder, if you like these, please do hit the like button, do subscribe, do hit that bell icon so that you know when new videos are uploaded. Share with your friends, share with your family, because this is always G-rated, as always. Of course, make sure that you check the link in the description for buying me a coffee or getting my affiliate link for Drive-Thru RPG and other cool stuff like that. Check me out on PayPal. If you want to make a little donation or something like that, you're welcome to do that. There's some stuff there. But again, can't wait to move on in our book today. We're approaching the Game Master section here coming up soon, and then we'll be switching gears and we'll be taking a look at those various different images in that short that I showed you and how we're going to kind of combine that together for something cool. So I hope you're looking forward to that as well. But good to be back with you. So let's get started. Here on the bottom of page 30, we have room number 3 entitled Choices. The door to this room opens easily. When it is opened, roll 1d6. On a result of 1 to 2, one of the wandering monster groups above, those were the 5 goblins or the goblin leader, see the wandering monsters sections to determine what is encountered otherwise. This room is littered with bits and scraps of cloth and leather, all rather rotten looking. There are 2 doors in the far corner, one on each side. The one on the right has some sort of writing scrawled on it. To note for the Dungeon Master, the writing is in an ancient language. A magic user might be able to decipher it with an intelligence roll. It says, "Beware the unquiet dead." This is a reference to the skeletons in room 4, just beyond the door. Now, the first thing you'll take note of there is the magic user is able to decipher it with just simply an intelligence roll. In Basic Fantasy RPG, there is a difficulty class alternative system that Chris and the group provides in the Basic Fantasy RPG book, where you can hit a target number to determine that intelligence roll, or the old school way is you just roll your intelligence or under with a modifier either helping you or hindering you on that particular roll, and that's the way that I play it. You could also do it using a d6 and giving a plus or minus modifier based on stat adjustment or a higher dice, or you could even do it as 3d6 or 4d6 and then roll under your stat. There's a bunch of different ways, so pick a way that works best for you and use that. But it's just interesting that all you have to do is just make that roll. There's no skills, so there's no need to do this arcana stuff and all these other things. That's not Basic Fantasy. Room number 4. This room has no notes about the door being easy to open, so the GM should assume that it needs to be forced. And the general assumption in Basic Fantasy RPG is, in fact, all the doors are considered stuck. The description of this room: a pile of bones topped by 2 human skulls lies in the far right-hand corner of this room. This room is otherwise empty, save for the dust on the floor and cobwebs on the walls and ceiling. If the room is entered past the 10-foot square alcove in the front of the door, then you read, "The bone pile rattles, and then rises up into the form of 2 complete skeletons. They advance on you, their bony hands outstretched." The skeletons are guarding the secret door in the corner, but of course there's no way for the adventurers to learn this. The skeletons will not leave this room, and if the adventurers retreat and close the door behind them, skeletons will return to the corner and lie down again. There are 2 skeletons, armor class 13, half damage from edged weapons, a 1 point from arrows, bolts, or sling stones, and that harkens back to the definite old school days where skeletons took barely no damage at all from missile weapons like that, and edged weapons as well. Hit dice is 1. Number of attacks 1, damage 1d6, move 40 foot, saves as a first level fighter, and the morale is 12. The distributive hit points are hit points of 6 and 7. And again, if I didn't tell you last time, I'll tell you this time. The way these things are written up in all the BFRPG modules is just really cool. What they do is they put the number or they'll just have a number of boxes there, and the boxes are meant to be checked off as they lose hit points, and it's just kind of a neat way to keep track of it if that's something you're interested in. He goes on to say, note that skeletons in basic fantasy RPG, at least, have some added defensive features. Edged weapons are less effective against them, and arrows, bolts, and slings do just 1 point per hit. Not all encounters will necessarily be as well detailed as the one above, so it's good to review the monsters in your rulebook before running the adventure. With the experience, you'll learn these things and find you need the rulebook less often. And don't forget that skeletons are undead monsters. This means that the cleric in the party may be able to turn them. Normally, you shouldn't give players advice, but since this is an introductory adventure, feel free to give that player a hint. Then he goes on to room 5. This is the secret room. The door to this room is marked with an S symbol on the map, and that's all you're told about it. Most secret doors in published adventures don't include instructions in the text of the adventure about how they are opened. The rulebook will tell you how to determine when or if player characters find a secret door, but beyond that, it's left up to you how they get it open. Here's where a good default will help you out. Most dungeons have walls made of stone. Secret doors are hidden by having the seams sealed in the gaps or concealed in the gaps between the stones. A single stone might function as a push button of sorts, freeing the door or allowing it to be opened. Whether the door closes itself or not, if left unmonitored, is of course up to you. But as always, feel free to be creative. Description: inside this small room you find a chest, but it's been smashed open. Coins litter the floor around the wrecked bits of the chest. Well, someone else has obviously looted this chest, but they left behind the smaller denominations of money. A turn spent gathering the coins will yield 300 copper pieces and 200 silver pieces. And by the way, in basic fantasy RPG, a turn is 10 minutes. And he says, this is a pet peeve of mine, and yet I've perpetrated it many times myself. Nice, even numbers of coins. What I do most of the time is deduct 1 from the hundreds place and roll a d10 to fill in the remaining digits. This also reduces the amount of treasure being handed out. Some modules give rather a lot, so it's rarely a bad idea to reduce it some. And I will let you know as well, basic fantasy role-playing game does not, without an alternate rule, give experience points for treasure found, gold pieces found, and stuff like that. That's not the default, although that was always the old school way it was done. But that's not the default setting in basic fantasy. Room number 6, Pit Trap. The doors, both of them leading from Area 3 to this room, are in good condition and open easily, but with a loud squeak. Roll 1d6 when the room is entered. On a 1, one of the wandering monster groups is entering this room from the staircase. This large room appears to be empty. There is what appears to be a burnt-out torch against the right-hand wall, and a rivulet of water runs down that same wall, across the room, and down the stairs ahead and to your left. There's also a door set in the back of an alcove at the right end of the far wall. The pit trap has a 1 and 2 on 1d6 chance of being tripped if any character stands on it or walks across it. Add 1 to the chance for each additional character on the trapdoor at the same time, so 3 characters on the trapdoor will result in a 1 to 4 on 1d6 chance of the opening of the trap. Anyone on the trapdoor, when it opens, must save versus death ray, with any dexterity bonus added to the die, or fall 10 feet to the bottom of the pit, taking 1d6 points of falling damage. Anyone who makes the save will have jumped to safety at the last moment, and the GM must decide where on the map they end up. The pit closes and resets automatically after 1 turn. At the bottom of the pit lies the skeletal remains of some adventurer. He still wears a suit of chainmail +1 and was armed with a normal dagger and a short sword +1. And the contents of his belt pouch lie scattered on the floor, 18 gold pieces and 5 platinum pieces. Remember that the adventurers have no way of knowing whether any of the items that they recover are magical other than to cast Detect Magic. And even with that spell, the actual bonus value or power of the item is not revealed. Only tell the players what their characters could actually know. In the case of magical weapons and armor, using them is generally the only way to discover the bonus value, or penalty if the item is cursed. The false door is bolted to the wall, and is of course a lure to tempt adventurers to their doom in the pit. The staircase descends to the second dungeon level. Now, let me stop there. There are so many different ways that you could run players determining what magical items do. I like the idea of them using them and kind of trying to figure it out on their own. But eventually, bookkeeping becomes a nightmare for you as a dungeon master if you don't give them the pluses of things. I'll just be honest with you with that. there is a bit of a challenge of keeping that hidden from characters. Old games, you could use legend lore or a bard's legend lore skill in first edition advanced D&D, an identify spell that came along for you to do that. There are a bunch of different ways. However it best suits you to run or do that is up to you. But I just think the bookkeeping of them never knowing is kind of a hassle for the dungeon master, but that's up to you. Okay, then we have on pages 34 and 35 are that map that I showed you. Again, the scale is 1 square equals 10 feet. So then on page 36 he says, moving on, so now you've seen a short but very ordinary dungeon adventure. You can absolutely use this adventure yourself. Hopefully my hints and tips will help you make your first time enjoyable. The most important thing is jump in, round up some friends, and pass around this book if you like, or just do it like in part 1 if that works for you. You probably won't be a great game master right off, and that's fine. The important thing is to start getting experience, because the more you get, the better you'll be. There are more hints and tips in Part 5 Game Mastery, but honestly, you'll benefit more from them after you've run a game or two. They'll make more sense when you've seen for yourself how role-playing games actually work. Later on in Part 6, Other Games, I'll discuss using adventures written for other game systems with Basic Fantasy RPG and vice versa. Adventures written for any old-school, quote-unquote, game are broadly compatible, and with a little effort applied before the players show up, you should be able to use almost any of them with whatever game system you choose. But as I say, that discussion is for later. After you run a few adventures, you may find yourself wanting to create one of your own. That's the topic of the next section. So, whenever you're ready, turn the page and we'll get started. So first of all, I'm going to echo exactly what he said. You're not going to get better at doing this if you don't just round up some good friends, pass around the book, and just start playing. And no, you're not going to be a great game master right off the bat. There's nothing wrong with that. The important thing is you get experience. And you get experience, you level up. No, you get experience and then you just get better at it. You tell better stories. There's less time to be involved in looking up stuff in the books. There's less time potentially arguing with one another about rules, or maybe even in the case of Basic Fantasy RPG, mostly the lack thereof, which I think is a good thing. And it ends up getting better for you. And you'll never know if you're not going to like becoming a dungeon master if you don't just dig in and try. And in some cases, and maybe in today's world, now that COVID's kind of still around, maybe it's a thing where you have to do it a little bits at a time until you get good at it, and you get what friends you can get, and you just decide, hey, maybe I'm not the game master, but you've been learning a lot over there, you want to try, so then they get a turn. And then that's how we've all kind of became game masters, I think, back in the old school days in the past. It might work that way for you today. You just try and have fun. That's the point, is having fun. All right, we're moving on to part 4 now, on page 37, creating an adventure. And in this section, he says, I'm going to show you how to design your own adventure. The first thing that you're going to need is a map. And then what he does is give you basically a very similar map to the other one. I will add this image onto this video as well, so you'll have this map to follow along with as we go through this one. He says, but this map was created using the Mapmatic +2 software found at http://mapmatic.basicfantasy.org. But you don't have to use a program to create a map. For the adventures I create for my own players, I draw my maps on graph paper, which works just fine. I create my maps that way and only computerize the ones that I would intend to publish, like the one here. Stocking the dungeon. Filling in the room contents is referred to as stocking the dungeon. Basic Fantasy RPG provides a set of random tables for dungeon stocking, as do other mini-games, and we're going to use them to rough out this dungeon. But first, let's talk about the map. I've created it to represent the second level of the dungeon under the abandoned tower, the adventure previously presented. Note that it is rotated. The arrow indicating north will tell you how, compared to the level 1 map. Something intelligent should lair in room 6. Whoever has their lair there knows about the secret door and can use it either to escape or to ambush characters in room 2. At Area 5 is the end of a tunnel that leads to a cave mouth in the side of a bluff nearby, used as an entrance by the occupants of room 6, as well as a way for the monsters to get in and out of the dungeon. Let's consider what the occupants of room 6 are. In traditional dungeons, each level down from the surface is harder than the one above it, and monsters are assigned to levels based on their toughness. This is something of an early attempt at game balance. First level characters would presumably know better than to enter the second level of the dungeon for fear of being wiped out by the tougher monsters there. This works fine for mega dungeons, the huge underground complexes that were the standard for dungeons in the early days of the hobby. This dungeon, though, is pretty small. Both levels together give it just 12 numbered areas to explore. So we're going to say that the whole dungeon is level 1 for purposes of difficulty. Looking through the rulebook, we see that there are just 2 intelligent races of monsters who fit the bill. Since we have goblins already on the upper level, let's say that the inhabitants of room 6 are kobolds. These little dog-faced humanoids are usually portrayed as diggers and as trap makers, so we'll have some sort of trap or traps built by them on this level. In fact, let's go ahead and blame them for the good condition of the traps on the upper level. We'll also assume they know about the goblins, but being cowardly have not chosen yet to confront them. The goblins don't know about them at all, having not gone down the stairs. Since, as I noted before, this is a small dungeon, let's further assume that the kobolds aren't a full lair, but just a group scouting this dungeon as a possible home for their tribe. There are too many monsters in this dungeon to suit them, though, so they've holed up in room 6 while they try to decide what to do. If they play their cards right, the adventurers might clear away all the other pesky monsters, and the kobolds might subsequently try to kill off the adventurers to keep the location of their new lair secret. I don't know how that sounds to you, but I'm looking forward to running this adventure already. So let's dive in and get the rooms filled out. Step 1. Random generation. There are 6 rooms here, as I've said before, so let's roll 6 times on the table in the Basic Fantasy RPG Core Rules, page 158 of the 3rd edition rulebook. I'll roll percentiles 6 times and get the following results. 71, monster with treasure. 89, trap. 44, monster. 06, empty. 87, special. 21, monster. I've already decided I want a group of kobolds in room 6, so we'll make that the monster with treasure room. Area 5 is a corridor area where I figure I'll have an automatic encounter check, as was done in the first level, so that can be the special. As an aside, a special room indicates something called a trick, is any room that isn't of the other types. It's not properly empty, it's not necessarily a monster encounter, nor an unguarded treasure, nor a trap. Specials are among the hardest rooms for me personally to come up with, but they're also some of the most fun rooms. With areas 5 and 6 taken care of, that leaves a trap, 2 monsters, and an empty room. Room 1, off by itself, looks like a good place for a lair, so we'll put one of the monster encounters there. Areas 2 and 3 are in the path of a character or monster would take between the stairs and the outside entrance, so I'd like to put the remaining monster encounter in room 4, and this leaves a trap and an empty room. Just randomly, I decide to put the trap in room 3 and the empty room in area 2. So now we need to actually put something in the dungeon. Let's do them in order. So the level 2 key. For this part, I'm going to go back to this format for my commentary so you can clearly separate the game materials from the explanation. And this is box text. Room 1 gets some kind of monster, I've decided. I'd like to have a monster that won't interfere with the other monsters in the dungeon, so I'll go with an undead encounter. In fact, let's go with zombies. Now, if you look them up in the rulebook, you'll see that zombies are 2 hit dice. I'd like to keep this dungeon not too tough, since I'm teaching my new players here, given that I think the thing to do is to have 2 zombies in the room. I'm working under the assumption that I'll have 3 to 5 players with new characters, so that should be a fair challenge for them. So here's the room. Room 1, zombies. There are 2 zombies, armor class 12, hit dice 2, number of attacks 1 by weapon, damage 1d8, move 20 feet, save fighter 1, and morale 12. They have hit points of 9 and 8 respectively. Notice I didn't include any box text. I'm writing this adventure for myself, so I'm not going to bother with that. I'll just make it up as I'm going along. I'm actually thinking that the zombies are lying in caskets. Perhaps there are 5 or 6 caskets here, each with a body in it. When 2 of them rise up to attack, this may cause the players a moment or 2 of extra fear as they wonder if the others will rise up also. Now we have room 2, which is empty. One thing that is not obvious is that the empty rooms don't have to actually be empty. An empty room doesn't contain a monster, treasure, trap, or special. It can still contain puddles, cobwebs, furnishings, wall hangings, discarded and useless items, trash or rubble. You get the picture. Just to be random, I decide the room is empty except for a shallow puddle in the southeast corner and 2 half-rotten doors leaned up against the east wall. Number 3, trap. So this room gets a trap. I pull out the 3rd edition of the Basic Fantasy RPG Core Rules for inspiration. On page 159, there is a handy list of traps. Looking over the list, I decide to go with poison gas. This room contains a poison gas trap. Each character who walks diagonally across the center of the floor has a 1 to 2 on 1d6 chance of stepping on the triggering stone. If this happens, the room fills quickly with a noxious gas, requiring a save versus poison each round of characters in the room. Failing the save results in 1d4 points of damage. Note that each round a character remains in the room requires another such save. If you're reading along in the rulebook, you may notice that I didn't actually use the version of poison gas found there. I just used the list for inspiration and created a less deadly but still dangerous trap for my dungeon. He goes on to fill in the rest of the rooms. He has rooms 4, 5, 6. He goes into some detail about that one, all the way through throughout the kobolds, and then eventually finishes up with some more monsters, and then we'll get into the game mastery section. So I think I'm going to stop there for now and let you kind of absorb all of this material. But again, I want to thank you for tuning in, following along, and listening as we're going through this book together. We're getting close to being near the end of it, but it's just a really, really awesome little book. I think it would be of great value as an old school gamer for you to really read and go through this book together. It's something that you can easily pass around at the table for, I think the ebook is like $2 and something or $3 and something. Online, it's really, really cheap. It's like $5 and some change on Amazon to get a printed copy. So it's really, really cheap to pass this around and pick them up a BFRPG rulebook while you're at it, for another $5-6 and pass that around the table, or just go and print that out for free on the website. And get to reading this stuff and get to looking at this stuff and go do some real good old school gaming. You'll notice as we're reading along, it's so incredibly rules light. There hasn't been a single thing I've been covering in the pages that requires any crunchy details and stuff like that. And I think that's part of the wonderful joy, simplicity, and fun of old school games like this. Is it's just stripped all down, and the fun is what you do with it and how you come up with things that you're going to do and how you describe things. And like even in that empty room, how do you just say it's not just an empty room? What's all of the environmental things you're going to describe and things in the room that you're going to describe, and they may have no value to any of the player characters, but they're going to have great value to the game itself. Going to add great content, great narrative, add more to the story. I just think that's incredibly cool. Again, you can do some of these things with various different game systems that you're playing, even the crunchy ones. And if those are the things that you want to play, that's totally cool. I understand that. As I've said before, my wife and my kids really like Pathfinder 2nd Edition, so my wife runs that. I'm trying to get finished up with a game that I'd ran a couple of years ago in that with them, so that I kind of step away from that and I don't run that anymore. We no longer play Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, but we played that for a couple of years. So whatever game system is your thing, if you find anything of value in this book, use it, pull it out for yourself, and the things you don't need, just set it aside, and that's fine. Ultimately, it's all about you and your friends getting together and playing a cool game of a D&D or other role-playing games and just having a good time together and making those memories together. So again, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hitting that like button and sharing the video and leaving comments. You guys have always had great comments all along. We're slowly approaching 290 subscribers. I'm blown away about that. So that's just really awesome. Another channel to really check out, man, this guy's got some great stuff, is the Dungeon Minister. I would really encourage you to go watch his stuff. Again, his are all G-rated, family-friendly, great videos. Cool way that he just goes through that stuff and tells the tales of how he creates stuff in the Beckme basic rules set and runs that for his family too. So just a big shout out to the Dungeon Minister. Thanks for tuning in and subscribing, and for all the others that have done that, for Rob's Game Group and Unscripted and Unchained and Bandits Keep and all those guys like that. I just really appreciate this content that's out there that we can watch and stuff like that. So as I always say in all of my videos, thanks again for tuning in. May all your rolls be nat 20s. All right, take care. Bye.